Sometimes a card can be more than just paper. It can feel like a little window into a peaceful moment. Today we are working with a brand new Windows to Stillness kit from Altenew to create a beautiful trifold window card featuring vibrant sunset hues, crisp silhouettes, stamping, and layered decorative window details. And the best part, this interactive design comes together more effortlessly than you may think. Hi, I'm Revati and welcome to my crafty space. Let's get started. For today's project, I am going to be working with the Craft Your Life project kit Windows to Stillness from Altenew, and I have to say this is such a beautiful kit to create with. It comes with its gorgeous stamp set, the layering window dies, and coordinating stencils, and also the embossing folder, which I plan on skipping for today's project. So there are many possibilities packed into one kit. I especially love how those small pieces work together to create that beautiful window scene and give the card such a beautiful dimension and detail. And of course, the packaging itself has some really fun project inspirations. I always love taking a look at those examples before I get started creating a beautiful project because they give you a great starting point, even if you end up taking decisions in a completely different direction, which is what we'll be doing today. Now, for today's card, I'll be using these elements to create a peaceful little scene with beautiful sunset colors and lots of layered details. So let's take a closer look and get started with our card today. Since we are creating a trifold card today, we are going to need two standard A2 size card bases. I'm going to be stacking these together, which will give us the three panels we'll need to create our trifold design. It is really simple way to create an interactive card without having to start with an oversized piece of cardstock. And I love how these three panels will give us plenty of room to build our little window scene. We'll start by creating our window for our front panel. Now, if you haven't already taken a closer look at the window to stillness die set, let me quickly walk you through some of the fun pieces that you get in here. Now, there are so many different dies that you can mix and match to create your own little window scene, which makes this set really fun and versatile. Now, you'll have all these different window elements along with some adorable little details that you can use to decorate your scene. It even includes those little couch cushions, which we'll be using for our card today. Now for my project, I decided to go with a simple rectangular frame. So I am going to start with the largest window frame die from the set and use that as the base for our front panel. Now, even though we are using two A2 size card bases to create our trifold, there's one little thing that we need to keep in mind. Once we start adding all the window elements and a little frame and all those dimensional pieces inside the card, it's going to get quite a little bit bulky. So to make sure that our trifold still closes nicely without everything getting squished, I like to give the inside panel a little extra room. I simply trim a small amount of the edge of the piece that'll sit inside the trifold. It's just that little adjustment, but it makes a big difference when it comes to fold everything up and close the card. This way, all those fun little dimensional elements have a little bit of breathing room. For our window, I wanted a little bit of acetate to give it a more realistic glass window-like look. But I also wanted to make sure that when we open the card, we don't see the acetate or any of the adhesive from the inside. So I cut a piece of white cardstock panel measuring 4 by 5 1/4 inches and temporarily held it in place with a little bit of washi tape. This lets me position everything exactly where I want it and more importantly gives me a clean finished look from both the sides of the card. Next, I'm going to use the larger rectangle die to create the actual window opening for our front panel. I like to take a little extra time with this step and make sure everything is perfectly straight and aligned before I run it through my die cutting machine. My trusty T-square ruler is perfect for this because it helps me line up the window with the edges of the card base and make sure everything is nice and even. Once I'm happy with the placement, I can go ahead and die cut the window opening and we'll have our front panel ready for all those fun window details. Since we have two layers of cardstock to die cut at the same time, there's a little trick I like to use here. I like to open up the card base and line up the panel right along the edge of my die cutting plate. Then instead of running the entire panel through the machine, I do a partial die cut, just enough to cut through the two layers where I need my window opening. This way the back panel stays outside the cutting area, which helps prevent any unwanted creases or marks from the die cutting plate. It's a simple little trick, but it really helps keep the inside of the card nice and clean. Now that I have all my die cutting windows ready, we also have that little white frame which I will save for later so that I can add it to the back of the panel once everything is set. Now that our window is ready, it's time to create the beautiful scene that we'll be seeing through it. For this part, I'm going to do some stenciling to build a background scene behind our die cut window. I went ahead and placed the trimmed card base inside our main window card base, making sure everything was lined up properly. This way I can stencil the scene exactly where I want it to appear when we look through the window, and everything will line up beautifully once the card is assembled. I placed both these panels onto my ultra sticky mat to keep everything securely in place while I worked. And just to make sure that the top window panel doesn't move around, I held it down with a little bit of washi tape. Now, this kit comes with 3 different stencils, and each one creates a completely different scene. I love that you can switch them up depending on the kind of view you want to create. Each stencil is numbered, and for today's card, I decided to go with stencil number 2. So let's go ahead and start building our little scene. If you take a closer look at the stencil, you'll notice there are 2 separate openings. This is what allows us to create that beautiful layered look on our scene, with each layer adding a little more depth and dimension to the project. Both of these openings have rectangular sections on the bottom with a little dome shape on the top, and for today's card, I am going to keep things simpler and skip that dome portion. I'll be just using the rectangular scene because that's going to work perfectly with the window design that we created on the front panel. Now, to get started, I started with some beautiful greens on the bottom, and I will be creating a little bit of hill-like scene. You will notice I have sticky notes kept around the stenciled area because I don't want any of that color getting on my white panel. For the first part of our scene, I'm going to create this beautiful green hills using fresh leaf and reindeer moss from the Whispering Woodland ink set. These 2 colors work really nice together, giving us a soft layered look for our landscape. And for the sky, I wanted to bring in a little bit of that gorgeous sunset feeling. So I'm using lemonade stand and mandarin burst to create a warm, cheerful glow behind our scene. I also placed a small post-it tape over the dome area at the top of our stencil. Since we are not going to be using that portion of the design, this little bit of masking will help make sure that we don't accidentally get into the that area and we don't accidentally get color in that area. You'll actually see me hold quite a bit of that masking or washi tape or even the post-it notes, but it's definitely worth taking that extra effort. Now I want to keep the front of our panel really clean and simple, and when we open the trifold, I want the scene that's revealed to stay neatly contained within those stenciled areas. So I'm taking a little bit of extra time to mask off anything that I don't want to get inked. Now this helps make sure we don't end up with any stray ink marks or little ink accidents outside of our little scene. It might feel a lot of masking right now, but trust me, it's going to make a big difference when we put everything together. And just take a look at how gorgeous this little scene turned out. I absolutely love the warm sunset colors paired with those soft green hills. But this is where you can really have some fun and make your scene completely different. You could switch up the colors, create a beautiful evening or a night sky, or even use some darker, moodier hues for the mountains to give the scene a completely different feel. Now, there are so many possibilities within this just one stencil. Don't be afraid to experiment and create your own little window view. Well, I decided to stamp a little bit of that foliage from the stamp set. Now, window view with some fun foliage, I think that really brings out the charm on this project. Next, I went ahead and stamped my silhouette using Obsidian Black Pigment ink, then sprinkled some clear embossing powder and heat set it. And just look how beautiful that black silhouette pops against our warm sunset colored background. I love the contrast, it really brings the whole scene to life. Now, the heat from the embossing did cause the panel to warp a little bit, but that's super easy fix. I simply placed the entire card base underneath a pile of books to flatten it out. While that's sitting under the books and getting nice and flat, we can move on to working on the front window panel. Before we start assembling our die cut window, I decided to add a little sentiment on the card front. To figure out the perfect placement, I temporarily positioned the window frame and the cute little bench on the front panel. This way I could exactly see where I had room for the sentiment without getting in way of any of those window details. For the sentiment, I chose Sending You a Breath of Calm from the stamp set. I stamped it using the same obsidian black pigment ink and then heat embossed it with clear embossing powder. I love how simple the sentiment is, and I think it fits perfectly with the peaceful little window scene we are creating. Now, I always like to use my grid transparency sheet, especially with these little sentiments, before I stamp them onto my card base. I really don't want to misalign anything at this point. And well, don't forget to run your anti-static powder tool before you stamp your sentiment for heat embossing. Now it's time to add the acetate to the back of our window. I added some thin double-sided tape all the way around the edges of the window opening and then carefully placed my acetate over it. I made the acetate slightly larger than the window opening so it would cover the entire area and give us that nice secure edge. And remember that 4 by 5 1/4 inch panel that we trimmed earlier along with our card base. This is where that panel comes back in. We are going to use it to sandwich the acetate between the front panel and that extra piece of cardstock. I'll adhere the panel right over the back of the window, which not only secures the acetate in place but also hides all of that tape and gives us that nice, clean, finished look on the inside of the card. I love these little tricks like this because everything looks neat and finished from both sides. Now, the acetate is definitely an optional step. You can obviously leave it out if you prefer, but I really feel that like adding that little layer makes such a difference. It gives the window a more realistic glass-like look and adds just that extra touch of dimension to the whole scene. It's a little small detail, but I think it really helps bring the whole window to life. Now that our window is ready, all we have to do is follow the layering guide on the die set and put all the pieces together to create a beautiful window frame. For my window, I decided to use the darkest and the lightest shades of brown that I had in my stash. I love the contrast between these two shades, really helps define all those little layers and gives the frame some beautiful dimension. And honestly, the layering is pretty straightforward, so it shouldn't take a long time to figure out which pieces go where. But if you get stuck at any point, don't worry, you can always go back to the inspiration and layering guide right on the packaging. It is a really handy reference to have while you're putting everything together. Once our window is assembled, our card front is ready to go. I love how beautiful this turned out. Now all that's left to do is attach our inner card base and turn this into a trifold card. Before adding any adhesive, I'd like to fold the entire card closed and make sure all the panels are lined up exactly where I want them to be. This is especially important with a trifold card and a window because we want everything to fold and close smoothly and look perfectly aligned. Once I'm happy with the alignment, I'll add some glue to the back panel and carefully adhere the two card bases together. And just like that, we have our beautiful trifold card taking shape. You could definitely use some strong double-sided tape to adhere these two pieces together, but I personally prefer using liquid glue for this step. The liquid glue gives me a little bit of wiggle room to make any final adjustments before everything sets. And because this is a window card, it's especially important to make sure that the outer and the inner panels line up perfectly. That way, when we fold the card open and closed, our little window scene stays beautifully aligned and everything looks seamless from the front. Technically, our card is done at this point, but you know me, I couldn't resist adding a few more fun decorative details. For this, I die cut three little cushions using the red and pink cardstock. The layering here again is super easy to figure out, and I absolutely love that little pop of color they add to what is otherwise a very clean and simple card design. To give the cushions a little more dimension, I also added some pink ink blending around the edges using the bright pink magenta shade. Now, it is such a simple step, but it really helps define the layers and makes those little cushions stand out even more. I adhered two of the cushions directly onto the card using liquid glue, and for the smaller cushion that sits on the front of the card, I add a little bit of foam tape to give it some more extra dimension and a fun pop. And with that, our beautiful card is almost ready. We just have one final finishing touch after everything is assembled together. Now, if you remember, we die cut the white frame at the very beginning when we were die cutting our window. Well, I went ahead and layered that white frame on the inside, right behind the acetate. This little extra layer helps cover up any of those edges and gives the inside of the window a nice and clean finished look. And now we can officially call our beautiful trifold card done. I absolutely love how this project turned out, and I will say there is a little bit of learning curve when it came to getting everything perfectly aligned, especially the window and the scene inside the trifold. But I'm really happy how it all came together. And if you take a closer look at the final pictures, you'll notice that I actually ended up framing the inside stencil scene as well, and even added a little sentiment there. That idea didn't come to me until I was clicking pictures for social media, and I'm so glad I decided to add it. You won't see that detail in this final reveal, but you'll see it in the pictures here. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching me create this clean, simple, and easy to make interactive trifold card. I hope this project inspires you to look at your supplies you already have and find a fun new way to use them. I'll be sure to link all the supplies that I used to create this project. And please note that all of those links are affiliate links, which means that if you shop using one of my links, I'll get a small commission at no cost to you guys. Thank you again for joining me today. Until next time, stay safe.